The sound of the train became a hypnotizing soundtrack, while outside a monochromatic world flew by. An endless loop of white, a constant pattern of scattered houses, vast fields and trees. We were on our way to the north again, heading deeper into the wilds of Lapland with each passing day. This time our destination was the northernmost part of Finland, close to the Norwegian border. When we arrived, we reunited with our good friend Eva and her dog Lily, who had been part of our last journey through Finland. We settled into a small cabin on a fjeld for the night and began planning the days ahead. After nearly a week on the road, it felt so good to finally pause. The next day welcomed us with an Arctic sunrise. Slowly the sun rose over the vast landscape, casting a soft glow. But the sun's warmth couldn't compete to the icy wind, as the temperatures dropped down to minus 30 degrees overnight. Despite the harsh cold, we were so excited to begin the adventure. 5 days in the wilderness are ahead, far away from civilization, in a remote backcountry cabin. Hannu, the owner of the cabin, was so kind to give us a ride with his snowmobile in. With gear, provisions and essentials packed, we ventured out. After some time we spotted the cabin, a small welcoming refuge in a wide landscape, with only a few scattered trees breaking up the monotony. This place felt like the definition of solitude, a small cozy escape in the middle of a harsh frozen wilderness. Standing there, I felt the isolation. No phone signal, no noise, and not another soul in sight. Just pure silence and endless snow. A place where time seemed to slow down. Eva continued this afternoon to photograph snow owls, while we stayed to take care of the cabin and the dogs. We warmed up the rooms, settled in, and let the simplicity of life here sink in. Days out here were beautifully simple. Nothing rushed, nothing unnecessary. Everything followed a rhythm of their own. Keeping the rooms and ourselves warm, cooking meals, and making sure we had water were the essentials. One of our daily tasks was to dig through the snow to reach the lake hidden below. Melting snow would take too much fuel, so we relied on this buried source for water. Equipped with a shovel, I started digging where Eva had marked the spot. Each scoop of snow reminded me of how life here was both challenging and rewarding in its simplicity. Out here, somehow even the smallest tasks became meaningful. The sun set early these days, painting the sky in soft pastel tones every evening. In these cold, the sound of walking on snow is something I began to love. Every step made a loud, satisfying crunch, a small reminder that we were in the right place. the colors of the day faded, absolute darkness settled over the landscape. Out here, far away from every light pollution, it was the perfect place to watch the stars. And for our luck, we didn't have to wait long before the first signs of the northern lights appeared. A mesmerizing band of green and violet lit up the dark sky above our heads. Another freezing day began. Frost built up overnight on the cabin windows, with fine textures of ice glowing softly in the morning sun. As we prepared ourselves to head into the frozen landscape, we were greeted with a beautiful sight. In the biting cold, ice crystals in the atmosphere refracted the sunlight, forming a halo around the sun. A solar parhelion, also known as a sundog, appeared above the mountain, with bright spots on either side of the sun. A stunning phenomenon unique to these Arctic conditions. Packed in layers of warm clothes, we set out to hike a nearby mountain. Our progress was slow. The wind had formed the ice into an unpredictable terrain, with some areas filled knee-deep and others frozen solid. As we moved farther away from the cabin, the landscape felt more and more like a frozen desert, an endless expanse of snow and ice filled with details and formations. Without many visual reference points, navigating was a challenge. Everything looked similar. We followed our line of sight uphill, against an icy wind that grew stronger with every step. Despite moving all the time, the bitter cold cut through all our layers, freezing our bodies and our faces. When we finally reached the summit, we were frozen but full of excitement.
We made it!
The reward was a breathtaking 360-degree view of this untouched wilderness. The only disappointment was discovering that our lid from the thermal bottle had frozen solid, robbing us the comfort of a warm tea up here. With the light fading and the cold getting stronger and stronger, we couldn't stay for long. Under a sky painted in cold, muted tones, we retraced our steps back to the cabin. Eva already got there and heated up the oven when we arrived. Frozen but deeply happy, we warmed up by the fire. It had been a day of raw, unfiltered beauty, one that would stay with us. Wind picked up on our final day at the cabin, shaping new patterns and textures across the landscape. It was time to make our way back to the car, saying farewell to this incredible place. With all our gear packed into backpacks and loaded onto sleds, we began a beautiful hike out. We stayed in the area and enjoyed one last colorful sunset. The next day will be an early start. It was time to explore new grounds. From the northernmost tip of Finland, we planned to drive to Varanger, a place at the untamed coast of the Barents Sea. The journey took us along frozen roads, past small colorful villages, and through icy cold landscape with steaming oceans. This area marks the easternmost edge of Norway, located even farther east than St. Petersburg. The weather here was unpredictable, changing with every minute and every turn we made. After hours on the road, we passed the otherworldly rugged coast. Rugged and harsh, yet holding a profound sense of peace. We rented a cabin on the eastern side, reaching it under the glow of the northern lights. A beautiful end to a day filled with contrasts. Days on the coast began easy, with the sun rising above the Barents Sea late during the day. Being so far away from everything else, this place feels truly isolated. Just a handful of small towns dot the coastline, many of them appearing deserted and forgotten, especially in winter. But there's an undeniable beauty in here, a unique atmosphere that feels powerful and grounding at the same time. The town of Vardø, located on an island in the east, was a bustling fishing port with a population of over 3,000, thanks to its fishing industry and the strategic location near Russia. But advances in technology made traditional fishing communities like Vado less competitive. Larger vessels could fish further away from the shore and have higher catches. As a result, many fishermen and families left Vado in search of work. With fewer local jobs and a weakened economic base, Vado's population halved over the decades, leaving the town struggling to maintain itself. Today, efforts to breathe new life into Vado extend beyond fishing, with cultural projects and festivals. And as you walk through its street, you will find street art around every corner. But the rugged coast of Finnmark carries a darker history. In the 17th century, the northern district witnessed the highest rate of witchcraft accusations in Norway. Over 100 people were put on trial, with 77 women and 14 men burned alive at the stake. This memorial in Vado is dedicated to those who lost their life. A haunting place, heavy with history and the weight of human fate. The exhibition within the museum tells the victims' stories of the lives they led, the accusations they faced, and the tragic endings they met. A chilling reminder of that past and the brutality of human actions. In the night it began to snow endlessly, an unforgiving storm that didn't stop for 2 days. We got cut off from the world in the small town we were staying in. But this situation brought even more stillness and solitude, and we enjoyed it with no other soul around. In this weather, this place felt completely abandoned. The blowing snow, combined with the soft light of the low winter sun, created a surreal atmosphere. Gentle tones brushed the landscape, making it appear peaceful and soft, yet hiding a harsh and brutal reality beneath. Only Odin seemed to be in his element, enduring the cold. While we were cozied up inside, he eagerly stayed outside, unimpressed by the storm. walks around town we never saw any other person. But we did encounter other locals, grazing reindeer moving quietly around our cabin, perfectly adapted to this wild environment. These animals are suited to survive in this extreme climate, relying on their ability to dig through snow to find lichen and moss underneath. Up north in Finnmark, reindeer are not just part of the landscape. They are central to the life and traditions of the Sami people who have lived here for generations. Reindeer herding is still a key aspect of Sami culture, and is practiced here. Observing them in their element, I found it hard to imagine what survival must be like in this vast, unforgiving landscape, relying solely on digging through snow to find food. After days of storm, the wind finally eased, and the sky hinted brighter days ahead. It was time to prepare for our next leg of the journey, leaving the village behind and setting out to explore somewhere new. But the weather gods had other plans. Strong winds had piled snow into thick banks, blocking the only way out of our cabin. With no one likely to clear the path anytime soon, we made the decision to push through a long stretch of knee-deep snow. The drive ahead turned into an adventure of its own. Blowing snow and the low winter sun created dramatic contrast. Until we reached the town of Vatsu. A beautiful sunset greeted us before we ventured further. We arrived at a place that just by looking at it seemed to calm the soul. A handful of scattered colorful houses dotted the coastline of this village. Perched on the edge of the Arctic Ocean, it felt like it existed in its own universe. The solitude here was something you could truly feel. A quiet stillness surrounded us, allowing us to slow down. The only sounds were the gentle waves brushing against the shore, the crunch of the frozen ground beneath our shoes, and the occasional calls of seagulls and cormorants along the coast. It was that kind of place that made the world feel simple. We spent the next day soaking in everything the coast had to offer. Watching the waves crash over the rocks and the sun move its path along the horizon. But this peace was fleeting. The next storm was already on its way, ready to hit the north again. We hiked to a lookout on the other side of the island. The winds were strong when we set out, but they were nothing compared to what awaited us later. On the other side we found a shelter, a small cabin perched along a coastline of rugged knife-sharp rocks. It was an incredible spot to watch the sea, but the storm had other plans. Visibility dropped to almost nothing as the winds grew stronger. The little cabin trembled with each gust, and the wind howled through the tiny gaps in the wood, creating an eerie, almost haunting sound. We decided to head back to our safe place. The winds were so fierce at times that it was hard to stay upright, while the snowdrift made it nearly impossible to see, with sharp ice stinging our eyes. Yet, even in this, we found so much beauty. The light filtering through the snow painted an unreal scene, one that we couldn't help but to admire, even as we stood frozen and exhausted. For the next few days we were stuck once again, and the storm forced all roads to close. But those days held a beauty unlike anything I had ever seen before. the reality was more like this. Wind pierced through the walls of our cabin, cooling it down entirely. And so we lasted out another storm. The storm eventually passed, giving way to snow. Still stuck in this tiny village, we reached out to the only local shop to ask if we could visit. It turned out to be the atelier of Claudia and Giorgio, a couple who left Italy in 2008 to start a new life up here. Giorgio collects old pieces of wood from the seaside, or from ruins of old houses, while Claudia engraves her art onto finer paper. Together they create stunning works that embodied the rugged beauty of Finnmark. We couldn't resist of taking a piece of this special place back home with us. The snow continued to fall for several more days. But eventually it cleared up just the day before we planned to leave, revealing what had been hidden behind the clouds. Leaving this place reminded us just how isolated it truly is. Driving across the fjord, which had been closed for days, felt almost otherworldly. A vast untouched expanse of snow, making it feel like driving across another planet. Later that evening, we arrived in a small town and met up with Veronica. Together we enjoyed the simple joy of cooking over a campfire and sharing stories under the open sky. We reached the final leg of our journey, a familiar place for us, the Lofoten Islands. Returning to the small red cabin by the sea, we arrived to a true winter wonderland. Snow-covered mountains framed the scenery, while seagulls screamed and circled overhead. After spending so much time far in the north, it felt good to head a bit further south. Even though Lofoten lies well above the Arctic Circle, the difference was noticeable. The days were drastically longer, and the sun was much stronger now, and even warmed our faces, a feeling we hadn't had in weeks. We spent our days strolling through the small village we lived in, soaking in the beauty of winter and exploring the charming fishing towns nearby. Lofoten is made out of 7 larger islands, stretching westwards into the Arctic Ocean. Despite its location at 68 degrees north, it has one of the world's largest temperature anomalies for such high latitudes. This is caused by the Gulf Stream, bringing warmer waters and preventing the sea from freezing. This is also why the weather here is so unpredictable. Whether it's in winter or summer, 2 days are rarely the same. Yet we are always drawn back to Lofoten. It has a little bit of everything. Countless peaks rising steeply from the sea, picturesque beaches, and towering granite walls. Because of the ever-changing weather, every visit feels new, offering something unexpected every time. March marked the peak of sky season in Lofoten. Fishermen began hanging the cod to dry, filling the air with the scent of what locals proudly call the smell of money. But it wasn't just the cod returning to Lofoten during this time. A pod of orcas also showed up again. We watched them hunting and play from the shore, a truly mesmerizing spectacle. Towards April, the snow began to vanish, melting away day by day. The nights instead became more vibrant and colorful, illuminated by the mesmerizing play of the aurora. The northern lights danced above us, painting their colors across the dark Arctic sky, lighting up the landscape in an otherworldly hue. Green purples and flashes of pink moved with a rhythm that felt both chaotic and deliberate. It was impossible not to be in awe. Spring arrived, bringing longer, sunnier days. The temperatures rose, melting away the last traces of snow. We spent our time strolling through town, sitting in the sun and soaking up the warmth and the stunning views around us. Every now and then, a creeping fog would roll in, wrapping the landscape in an atmosphere that I haven't seen that much up here. It was a beautiful and fitting ending to our winter journey. Quite peaceful and unforgettable.